The U.S. Attorney General charged Goodlett, as well as former LMPD detectives Joshua Janes and Brett Hankison and former Sergeant Kyle Meany earlier this month. The federal charges accuse officers of falsifying information on the search warrant used to enter Breonna Taylor's home and violating her Fourth Amendment rights, resulting in her death. WHAS 11's Isaiah Kim Martinez was inside the courtroom today. Isaiah, what's next for Goodlett after pleading guilty today?
Well, Shay, we wait on Goodlett's sentencing date, which for right now is set for November 22nd. A probation officer will take her offense level and criminal history into consideration to nail down a sentencing guideline range. Of course, the judge will make the ultimate call. Here's a key detail for the community to keep in mind here. Goodlett's sentencing date comes after the current trial dates for the three officers charged, which are all set for mid-October. We talked with U of L constitutional law professor Sam Markison, who tells me it's safe to say this means part of Goodlett's plea agreement is to testify in their trials. He says since Goodlett is saying she did in fact work on a cover-up with Janes in a garage years ago, that his attorneys would now have to prove her facts to be wrong in front of a jury. We also saw Tamika Palmer in the courtroom today watching every development closely. Now, the judge reiterated Goodlett will not be in jail custody at all during this pre-sentence period because she says Goodlett does not pose a danger to the community.
Yo, the fucking dude, people. So, if people don't know, and if you watch my channel, you should know because I've been covering it. But, one of the officers in the Breonna Taylor case pled guilty. Civil rights violation charges, obstruction of justice. So, new information got released as to her plea and, you know, the things that she had to basically admit to. And what you read here is police corruption at its height. At its fucking height, man. And people wonder why police face so much scrutiny. And why people, especially in the black community, have such lack of respect for them. Because what you ready to listen to, and it's kind of lengthy, but what you ready to listen to is shit that people in the black community all across America been knew. This is not no one-time thing. Like, this is the shit that they do to get these warrants. Listen to this shit. New details are now public in the plea agreement for one of the former Louisville Metro Police Department officers now federally charged by FBI in relation to the death of Breonna Taylor. In the court documents, Kelly Hannah Goodlett describes knowing that some of the warrant used to enter Taylor's home on March 13, 2020 was not true. It also states that they were at Taylor's apartment looking for drugs, money, and drug trafficking. Detectives found none of those items at her apartment. Goodlett admits to meeting with Joshua Janes, the lead detective on the case, to go over their story. The addendum to the plea agreement states the target of the investigation by LMPD's place-based investigation was Jamarcus Glover, Taylor's ex-boyfriend. As part of the investigation, detectives also looked at whether Glover was trafficking drugs at Taylor's home and at another woman's home whom with he had a child, it states. The documents named James as the primary investigator and the main person who wrote the warrant affidavit. Goodlett told investigators she fact-checked the affidavit and added information to it. Goodlett states the most important information in the warrant that linked Taylor to Glover was the claim that Glover was getting packages at her apartment on Springfield Drive. The plea document states Goodlett and James knew the information was false. Goodlett also confessed to knowing that John Mattingly, a former LMPD sergeant, told them that Glover was not receiving packages at Taylor's home. Detective James told her that Sergeant J.M. had found that there is nothing there, or similar words to like effect, meaning there was no evidence of J.G. getting mail, and that Taylor's address was not flagged by postal for receiving any suspicious packages. The addendum states, Detective James expressed his disappointment to Detective Goodlett. The document continues. Goodlett told the FBI that the information about lack of packages going to Taylor's home cut against their assumption that Glover kept drugs and money there. The FBI states both Goodlett and James had a duty to disclose that information in the warrant affidavit, for which Jefferson County Judge Mary Shaw was tasked with reviewing. Goodlett then received a draft of the warrant affidavit written by James. She did not object to the false information about the packages being included, even though she and James knew the information was false. Goodlett told the FBI she did not say anything about it because she had once been ostracized in her career for trying to report another officer's use of excessive force, the police states. According to the plea agreement, Goodlett also knew that they needed to freshen up the warrant for Taylor's home because it did not have enough current information to connect Taylor's apartment to J.I.'s drug dealing. The document also states that Goodlett knew that Glover had not recently visited Taylor's home. The last time he had was 6 weeks before the warrant was executed. In order to get the warrant approved by Judge Shaw, Goodlett said she added a paragraph which describes James using a database to verify that Glover used Taylor's apartment as his current home address. The FBI continues to state that both Goodlett and James knew that information was misleading because they knew Glover was not actually living there. In fact, the FBI state James and Goodlett also knew that Glover had elsewhere used another former girlfriend's address in the home, which also would be raided on the same night as the raid at Taylor's apartment as his primary residence. Goodlett told the FBI James had asked for the warrant at Taylor's apartment to be no-knock warrant because these drug traffickers have a history of attempting to destroy evidence, have cameras on the location that compromise detectives once an approach to the dwelling is made, and a history of fleeing from law enforcement. Goodlett had no evidence to believe that Taylor was a drug trafficker, or that she had ever tried to destroy evidence or flee from police, the FBI stated. Goodlett also confessed to knowing that Taylor was expected to be home alone during the night of the raid. She knew that based on conversations with James and their supervisor, Sergeant Kelly Maney, an officer who was also charged by the FBI. In the addendum, Goodlett states that James chose Judge Mary Shaw because he believed Shaw would not closely scrutinize his warrants. She did remember officers changing their use of no-knock warrant for Taylor home to a knock warrant and announce warrant on the briefing before the raids. Detective Goodlett observed that Maney looked very nervous during this meeting, the document continues. After Taylor's death, investigation with the LMPD's Public Integrity Unit asked James and Goodlett for an investigative letter detailing information they found in their investigation. The addendum states that Goodlett decided to continue lying about Mattingly's statement about packages to Taylor home. At the time Goodlett wrote the investigative letter, she did not know that James had another conversation with Mattingly in which Mattingly again confirmed there was no evidence of Glover receiving packages at Taylor's apartment. Goodlett hoped the investigative letter would clear both of them, the addendum states. However, that changed when it was publicly released that the postal inspector had announced that there was no packages going to Taylor's home. At that point, Goodlett texted James, knowing that she and Detective James were in trouble, the document states. James and Goodlett decided to meet in the garage the next day. At the garage meeting, Detective James told Goodlett that they needed to get on the same page because if it went down, so to speak, for the Springfield Drive warrant, she would go down too. Detective James made it clear to Detective Goodlett that he wanted her to repeat his false statements, the plea agreement states. Goodlett placed blame on James for pursuing her to go along with the false story that Mattingly had said there were packages going to Taylor's apartment in a suggestive, badgering way. The addendum states she claims she eventually buckled and agreed to repeat it to the others, including the investigators with the Kentucky Attorney General's office. Goodlett told the FBI that Maney had gone to Taylor's apartment to conduct surveillance and gather any new information on Taylor. However, Maney found nothing. Goodlett claims she did not know that while conducting that surveillance, Maney had noticed her boyfriend Kenneth Walker's car at her apartment. She claims she also did not know that he had a concealed carry permit. Goodlett states she would have thrown a fit if she had known about that information and that it was never provided to the officers tasked with raiding her apartment. She knew that information should be included in the documents related to the search warrant. Goodlett pleaded to a conspiracy brought by the FBI 2 weeks ago. The charge is a civil rights federal felony. These officers fabricated the most important evidence in getting the warrant for Breonna Taylor house. Those was the packages that they said was delivered, that the post office denied. That was the key. That was the reason for the no-knock warrant. That was the reason for the warrant to begin with, because she was supposed to have drugs and money in the house. But none of that was true. Now, I don't know what made them want to target this woman. I don't know if it was the fact that they had such disdain for the ex-boyfriend, or this is normal police practices. Because what they did was egregious, man. That shit caused the death of this woman's life, man. And the traumatization of the boyfriend who she was currently with. Because remember, he got shot when they busted into the house. He tried to defend what he thought was an intruder. It was the fucking police intruding. Killed this woman. Then they didn't just lie on the warrant. Once they seen things started getting tight on them, they concocted a story, and they made sure it matched. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this woman. I think she might be way more complicit as she's making it out to be. Because what it sounds like to me is she was with it at first, and then she tried to back away from it. Tried to distance herself from it. Like she was pressured into keeping it going. But you wasn't pressured when it started. So how is people supposed to believe that? She trying to make herself out to be a victim in this. But you knew what you was doing. And y'all got together and y'all went to a judge who y'all thought was sweet, basically, for lack of better words. Since she not going to really question the warrant, she just going to sign off on it. And I remember when I did the video back when this shit first happened. This was on Facebook, way before I was on YouTube. The judge signed off on, I think, 10 or 12 warrants in 4 minutes. There's no way she looked at these warrants. But she's not facing no accountability. And this officer, who's basically telling on the rest of the officers, is only facing 5 years in prison. But this is the question I got. Because we didn't all seen situations where, I know I was locked up with a dude. Him and his homeboy tried to rob the Super Fresh. Police killed his homeboy. He got charged with the murder. What's different in this case? They went into our house off of false pretenses. She got killed. Why there's no charges? Why there's not murder charges? Why is it just obstruction of justice? Why is it just civil rights violations? Because basically, this false warrant killed her. Them printing up this false warrant attributed to her death. She died for no reason. She wasn't a part of the investigation. She wasn't dealing with the intended target for the raid. That wasn't her boyfriend no more. He hadn't been there for 6 weeks. Then in 2 months. She moved on. But these police just couldn't, they couldn't accept that. They couldn't accept that. And this woman, Breonna Taylor, is dead, man. This is a fucked up situation, man. Fucked up situation, man. But this is what they do. I said back then, and I'm going to say it again. I have seen police sit outside people's houses 30 minutes, get a warrant. How? Why is that process so quick? There's no way a judge can look over all this information and make an accurate decision or determination, or as if this house need to be searched, or the information given qualifies for a search warrant. But this is how it goes, man. And it's another thing we learned too with the article I just read. Police don't tell on each other. She said one time before, she tried to go to the police union or internal affairs about the fuck she called it, excessive force claim, and they ostracized her. They treated her like shit because that's against the code. Same thing with the streets. It's against the code. So when people get to talking about that, telling, that's what people need to do that's in the streets. Or just in general. People mind their business out here, man. That's what you know, that's what you raised up on. Because at the end of the day, people gonna get caught for what they did anyway. Everything come around full circle. Something called karma is real. People can play with it. But you get what you receive out here in this world. And this is a sad situation, man. Now I think her family got a lawsuit and they sued, but the officers that I think it was an officer held criminally responsible. But, you know, he got found not guilty. He got charged for shooting bullets in the wall or some shit like that. Slap on the wrist. Officer Goodlett she was still on the force. Up until last year or 2 years ago. Still on the force. And I guarantee you, that whole force knew she lied. Knew they lied. The whole force. This is common practice. This is what they do. It's not news. It's just news to the public because a lot of people put so much faith and so much stock into the police department. They really believe this blue shield go by the book. They really believe the system go by the book. But they don't. Now, when you live in certain environments and certain neighborhoods, and people got to acknowledge that and stop being grained at that because you live in a bubble. Because every time you see the police, they treat you with respect. They treat your friends with respect. But that don't excuse the things that they're doing to everybody else. But let me know how y'all feel about this shit in the comments, man. Are y'all buying her story? Was she really just this innocent victim when things got too intense? Or she know jail time coming and she just trying to get a deal. So she throwing everybody under the bus. Make sure y'all subscribe to the channel, man. Like, comment, share. You feel me? All of that. I'm out.